Gothic backdrop.
In 1805, aged 17, after an aristocratic schooling, Byron's final rite of passage before becoming a true gentleman was to attend university.
He had hoped to go to Oxford and did not get in due to a spotty record, particularly in terms of behavior, so went to Trinity College, where he hobnobbed again with the richest and most dissolute, party-giving and attending young lords who spent more time in the local brothels. Very little time spent in studies, which was not even expected of young lords at Oxford or Cambridge at that period.
And he liked to spend, and he spent money that he didn't have. He used to write letters home asking for money for decanters, for booze, for more booze, for more decanters.
At Cambridge, Byron began to show his true hedonistic colours, but this was also matched by a new political idealism.
When he was not allowed to keep his dog Smut, wonderful name, in his rooms, he brought a pet bear.
Dancing bears were seen to be analogous to slaves, and if you freed a dancing bear, then that was a way of showing your solidarity with the anti-slavery movements.
Cambridge also allowed Byron to explore his burgeoning sexual desires.
It was also at Cambridge where he fell in love with a young chorister, John Edelston. And Byron's passion for this young man, a youth actually, a very beautiful boy with an exquisite voice, certainly was a very expensive passion in every sense. It haunted him because homosexuality was a capital offense.
Cambridge also had a subculture where they had shared signs and shared words. So they talked about Methodism, which was a secret reference to homosexuality. And Byron talked about his hyacinths, which were the young boys that he was attracted to. If Byron had been caught in homosexual act, it was more likely that he would have been hanged for it. And other homosexuals had actually hanged for the offence.
Byron was tortured by his homosexual desires, fearful of England's strict laws. After finishing at Cambridge, he decided to travel abroad to Europe, a tradition followed by many of his aristocratic contemporaries.
The reason for Byron's escape to Greece, and I think we need to look at it as an escape first of all, was perhaps because of his increasing desire to have more sexual expression and more sexual freedom.
Although he enjoyed the life of a sexual tourist, his travels to Greece had another, more powerful effect on Byron. The classical world of Greece and Rome was the core part of every young gentleman's schooling.
To be able to travel in a real mythological landscape was really important for Byron, to be able to go to those landmarks, those places which Homer talks about.
But Byron was also depressed by what he saw. The classical ruins inspired him, but highlighted the decline from Greece's ancient glory.
And that sort of mixture of ideal and kind of tawdry reality is something which marks his life, which marks his poetry, which is a kind of distinguishing feature of Byron, I think. This mixture of the high, the ideal, the sublime, the noble, with the degraded and the pathetic.
Byron had found sexual freedom in Europe, but he had also found his muse. Poetry had been an aristocratic hobby throughout his youth, but now he decided to write a poem inspired by his travels, a poem which would launch him into stardom overnight. In 1811, aged 23, Byron returned home to England, enriched by his grand tour of Europe. He was now a gentleman ready to enter London society.
The grand tour always has to end, like every party. It's an extended party to that extent. It's the end of one's care for youth. I think the grand tour has always marked a kind of divide.
However, his homecoming was marked by tragedy almost immediately.
Byron learnt about his mother's death just after he got back from Greece. He was kind of racing to get up to Newstead before she died. He heard that she was gravely ill, and by the time he arrived, she was dead, and he was extremely cut up about that. He was found weeping over her coffin by one of the servants as he got all ready to go to the funeral and then couldn't face it and went in for a boxing bout with one of his servants, which was probably a way of letting out his feelings.
Byron had had a fraught relationship with his mother, but she had been his only close family. He was distraught. But yet again his fortunes were about to change. His poem Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, which he had written whilst away, had just been published, and he was now in the cultural spotlight.
Childe Harold was an account of a young man who goes to Europe and his adventures there. And of course everyone immediately drew a parallel to Byron, who had done a similar sort of, well now I think the world's most legendary gap year. It was enormously popular.
Admire, exult, despise, laugh, weep. For here there is such matter for all feeling man.
As the title hero Childe Harold wandered broodingly through the romantic landscapes of Europe, he was quickly associated with Byron himself.
Byron wakes up one morning, he says, and finds himself famous when Childe Harold is published, and it's supposed to be one of the most extraordinary publishing phenomena, that it just goes through multiple editions. Childe Harold, it sells out. He also finds himself adored overnight, adored by thousands of women who sort of throw themselves at him, write him letters, send him locks of hair, tell him in these letters how much they love his poetry, but also kind of imply all kinds of other affections. They find his impassioned, sincere, heartfelt verse very appealing and liberating.
Romance, gossip and titillation were part of the general milieu of 19th century aristocratic life. Byron was now a favourite at the most fashionable dances and banquets of the day.
Sex was everywhere. It was a commodity that was being bought and sold. Byron, of course, didn't need to buy or sell his sex. He got it on a platter from women who were reading his poetry, and he was meeting elite women who were not adverse to scandal. Because of Byron's pull for women, he managed to pull quite a few of them.
Byron's sexual allure drew him into a tangled web of affairs with the most elite women of his day. As women fought over him, one in particular attracted his attention.
Lady Caroline Lamb represented for Byron the most aristocratic young woman that he could possibly have met, and as such she enjoyed a kind of flagrant independence of behavior. Nothing could touch her. It was that status of being completely sure and secure about where she was and her privilege at the top of the heap, a security that Byron never achieved.
Caroline would have been an excellent choice socially if it had not been for the fact that she was married.
Caroline Lamb said about Byron, he was mad, bad and dangerous to know. But I think that also summed her up as well. Caroline was very much somebody who was of her own mind and wouldn't be controlled. She did exactly what she wanted when she wanted.
And she was in a certain sense fun to be with, and in a certain sense too, he could be wicked with her. Byron liked that because he was playing at wickedness. He's always playing at wickedness more than he's actually wicked, but she helped him to do that. Then he got bored with her, because I think in the end there's a certain shallowness about Lady Caroline Lamb.
As Byron's interest waned, Caroline became increasingly obsessive.
She famously cut herself in front of him, had a public burning of all of his letters to her. She did all of these things to make her relationship with Byron as public as possible. She was the original kind of bunny boiler, this creepy thing of wanting to possess him completely.
Caroline became less and less discreet and reveled in the flagrant and the exhibitionistic, which I think ultimately she frightened him.
Because of his humble origins, Byron was incredibly insecure about his status and did not want a scandal to affect it.
It was a double-edged sword in the sense that he felt slightly trapped by his celebrity, certainly irritated by it in the form of, Caroline Lamb's shenanigans after they'd finished their affair. But it was necessary to the whole Byron phenomenon.
Although Byron was now a celebrated poet, he was heavily in debt. Newstead Abbey and a playboy lifestyle had drained his finances. He needed to find a rich wife, but any whiff of scandal would destroy his chances.